I will call our May 19th meeting to order. Kathy, please let the record show that all board members are in attendance. John, at this time, I'll ask you to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, let's do the official thing. So we have a couple flags for your options. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Our next, we need to approve our agenda. The recommended action is that the board approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Jill. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Charles. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll for the vote. Denise?
Aye.
Jerry?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Bruce?
Aye.
Charles?
Aye.
Sharita?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Our first item of business is to review our consent items. We do have a recommended action, and is Carol planning to make any comments, or will we just move forward?
Not on consent. I think you're good.
Okay, all right, thank you. So the recommended action is that the board approve the consent agenda items 2.01 through 4.01. Is someone willing to affirm that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you, Denise. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Jerry. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I will call the roll. Denise?
Aye.
Jerry?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Bruce?
Aye.
Charles?
Aye.
Sharita?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Our next agenda item is 5.01, our treasurer's report. I believe Carol will step up to the presentation, up to the podium in the board table at this point. Thank you. Welcome, Carol.
Good evening. Thank you very much. So yes, I miss seeing your wonderful faces in this room with us, but a few of us are around for the presentations this evening. So regarding the treasurer's reports, we have very minimal budget amendments presented for you this evening. Simply a $1,021 increase on revenue and the same on expenditures. And that is relative to some work for an elementary playground equipment. So basically moving those funds between revenue and expenditure. And with regard to our items of interest, we've highlighted for you that we continue to carry that stable fund balance relative to our budgeted numbers for revenue and expenditure for the current year, planning for an ending fund balance of 17.72%. If you have any questions for me regarding all the other reports that have been posted, including the bond financial report, the investment report, other reports that provide summary information, I would be happy to answer those for you.
Thank you, Carol. Are there any questions for Carol at this point?
I would just add that at the during administrative reports, I'll dive into a little of the conversation about withholdings that have been announced by the governor's office and the department last Friday, kind of the status of what we know. It hasn't changed much of our reality today, but it will change it in the next 30 to 60 days as this budget year comes to a close. So I'll bring you some updates.
Thank you, John. Okay, hearing no other questions or comments at this point, I will read the recommended action. The recommended action is that the board approve the treasurer's report as presented. Is someone willing to affirm that motion?
So moved.
Okay, Jill? Do I have a second? Okay, Jerry with the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Denise?
Aye.
Jerry?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Bruce?
Aye.
Charles?
Aye.
Sharita?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Our next agenda item, 6.01, is that there are no informational reports this evening. Our agenda item 7.01, board policy adoption revisions, there is no policy to review tonight. That leads us to agenda item 8.01, the Nahon parking rental. And Carol will brief us on that before we consider that motion. Carol?
So the lease, the rental, it's a lease rental, originated July 2009. And this parking area supports the Craft Administrative Center here on St. Louis Street. And this particular new lease rental will cover the period July 1, 2020 through June 30, 22. It does carry a 9.8% increase. We had enjoyed a few years with no increases. It also carries a right of first refusal in that if the property owner ever determined to sell the property, we would have the opportunity to purchase it first. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer those.
Any questions or comments for Carol? Okay, hearing none. Carol, do you want to read the motion or do you want me to?
I'll be happy to read it.
That would be great.
That the board authorize and approve a third amendment to a lease by the school district of the parking lot located immediately west of the Craft Administrative Building in Springfield, Missouri, from the Nahon Family Trust for a term of 2 years and a price of $1,450 per month. This is a renewal of an existing lease. Carol Embry, Deputy Superintendent Operations, is authorized and directed to execute the third amendment to lease on behalf of the school district.
Thank you, Carol. Is someone willing to affirm that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Jerry, do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Charles. Any discussion?
Carol, that is a fixed price for
Yes.
both. Okay.
That is correct.
Good question. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Denise.
Aye.
Jerry.
Aye.
Jill.
Aye.
Bruce.
Aye.
Charles.
Aye.
Sharita.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Our next agenda item, Carol will present to us as well, which is the 8.02 Glendale Turf and Goal Post Replacement. Carol?
Thank you. So this item actually is one that was referenced in the April 21 budget presentation on capital funds. You may recall that. It is relative to the Glendale Turf, and the important thing to note is that we go through a prioritization process to identify the needs in the system to ensure that we're providing appropriate instructional spaces and other spaces, and many factors are included in that analysis, including safety. The GMAX testing is a test that is performed on turf, and for the past couple of tests, we've had two tests rather in the past 2 years, and we've seen a decline in the testing for both of those years. And so while the life of the turf can be between 8 to 10 years, it's certainly relative to the use of that field, and this is a heavily utilized field. It provides for 3 seasons, football, boys soccer, and girls soccer, and it's weekly used by community athletic programs, and certainly on a daily basis by our physical education instruction. So the recommendation is that we would utilize an open market cooperative contract via Sourcewell from the bid received on May 5. Burns & Jones Construction would replace the football field turf and goalposts at Glendale High School. The funding would be included within the FY21 capital budget. Total cost, $535,460. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, are there any questions for Carol?
I've got one. If I'm correct, we did 3 schools about the exact same time. Isn't that right? Kickapoo, Hillcrest, and Glendale.
Correct.
Is there a reason why Glendale's is needing to be done quicker than the other 2?
And it goes directly back to the usage, and that is what causes the GMAX testing to be variant. that just means there's heavier use. And so it's all about the impact and how the physical body interacts with the turf. That's what they're rating, basically.
I know as a comparison at Kickapoo, we have soccer locations, right? A separate soccer field for Kickapoo. And if you think of Glendale, they're on it for both girls and boys soccer. So that's a lot of additional use, I think, that we see happening in Glendale on a regular basis. So I don't know if that's what's causing it, but it's certainly, I think, used at a heavier rate.
And certainly within the next few years, we will be making recommendation for replacing those turfs as well.
Carol, you had you mentioned the GMAX rating and indicated that perhaps as of at least yesterday that it was on the high end, nearing the end of its safe, useful life, and that another test was to be done today.
Correct.
Did we get the results on that?
We did get the results for that, and they do check a variety of spaces within the field. It did overall receive a rating that shows more elevation as compared to the previous rating. So it did increase, which in this situation, more is not better. That means it's getting further away from 100, which is the testing level of a natural grass field.
Right. Did it reach the level where it's not indicated to be safe? We
believe that additional usage of the field in this upcoming season could be an unsafe situation on certain parts of the turf, and absolutely recommend that it be replaced.
Carol, can you help answer the timeline question for, why we're considering this at the May meeting as opposed to another time?
During the normal budget recommendation phase?
Yes.
We do have a variety of projects where we do need to receive approval prior to that June budget process, and that's because of the work that needs to take place over the summer. So in this particular situation, the turf replacement process is scheduled to take 8 to 11 weeks. And if we don't have approval at this time, substantial completion cannot be achieved by August 10th, 2020, and that's the first day of practice.
Okay. Thank you. Jill?
I really just want to say thank you. This is the first time in my life, even though I was a three-sport athlete and care a lot about sports, this is the first time in my life I've read so much information about whether and how to replace a turf field. And I want to thank you for the diligence you put into this, and I appreciate it.
I would need to defer that to our Director of Athletics, Josh Scott, and to our Executive Director of Operations, Travis Shaw, for their work through this process as well.
Okay, well, go Travis and go Josh.
Well, I think one of the positive things out of this, I know 8 years ago or 10 years ago when we started the process initially, there was question about usage. Did it make sense to spend this kind of money to put in a turf field on any of our facilities? And I think this answered that question pretty quick, that it made a whole lot of sense. I know you have to replace it, but we knew that going in, that it had an 8 to 10 year life when we started. But I know there was a lot of question about, at that time, will it get used? Will it make sense? Is it a cost justified? And this, to me, this supports that was a good decision 8 years ago to do that, because it's getting used. So I think it's a positive thing. I know it's a lot of money, but it's getting useful life.
Thank you, Jerry, for that contextual comment as well. Any other questions or comments for Carol?
My hope is that it gets used August 10th. That's mine.
For more reasons than one, right?
Yes, exactly. A lot of reasons.
Yes, Charles?
I guess my only reservation, and it's not about the field as much itself as it is the timing. I mean, John referenced the substantial withholding. And so as board members, we're going to be spending a lot of time, blood, sweat, and tears, I anticipate, although the amount we'll spend will be dwarfed by the amount that John, Carol, and everybody else will spend trying to bring a budget in where we're going to have substantial withholdings. And making this decision very late in the year makes the hole out of which we need to dig even deeper. And I think that because our spending will create a certain set of priorities, intended or otherwise, and it does give me pause in that regard. And I do think we have a lot of information. I've learned more about GMAX than I had ever known before, and frankly, ever wanted to know. And that's why I asked the question about, is this something that has to be done now? Because safety matters, right? And if we've exceeded that level of 165 or 163, whatever it was, then it would be a no-brainer. If we're not quite there, given the other priorities we have to juggle, I don't know that $500,000 right now on this is the best, highest use of these funds. That said, I may well be a minority opinion, and I'm cool with that. I know this is not an easy choice for anybody.
Well,
Thank you, Charles.
I think the problem is we don't know all these other things yet. That's the problem I have. If I knew all the other, if I knew all the withholds, if I knew what was going to happen next year with tax base, if I knew all that, then I could put this someplace. But how quickly things are changing, I've been through this at least twice with this type of situation, not this fast, but we kind of saw it coming at least twice. So you could spend some more time prioritizing, but these things are happening so fast, it's almost like you have to deal with what happens today. And you don't really, we just don't have any idea of what's going to happen down the line. So this, if I did know, then this probably would not be, if I knew there was going to be a whole lot of less money. But when it comes, if it comes down to safety, then to me, I have no choice. I really have no choice on this. If it's a safety concern and there's going to be 1,000, up to probably 1,000 kids on that field numerous times during the next year, then I don't have a choice.
And Bruce, that's really where it came down for us, is as we prioritize capital spending that we presented in April, if you looked at the deterioration scores of the GMAX testing over the last couple of years, that is very clear where we're headed, and this is a safety issue that takes highest priority for us. We would certainly pull other things off that capital list well before this because of the safety concerns. So that's why we bring it for you today, because the only way to deliver it on August 10th is to make sure that we move it forward. And if withholds come that are severe enough, there are other places we can go in the capital budget to stop some other expenditures. So. Yeah,
and I guess it's the GMAX is not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And if we don't do it now, next year it's going to be worse. And now I'm even concerned about budget for next year. And so, you could be looking at 2 years down the road before you decide to do it. And I don't think we can live with that at all from a safety standpoint. And so I think it's a priority we need to get done now so that we don't have to deal with that.
Thank you, Jerry. And John, I didn't say thank you, John, for your additional comment as well. I know we are all aware of being good stewards in all of our positions, and we also are keenly aware of balancing the reward versus the risk in all of our fund accounts moving forward. So I know we're all being very thoughtful. I will, if there's no more comments or questions, then I will read the recommended action. Any other comments or questions for Carol at this time? Okay, all right. So with agenda item 8.02, the recommended action is that the board approves the bid to replace the football field turf and goal post at Glendale High School from, I guess is it Byron? Carol?
Burn.
I'm sorry, Burn and Jones Construction as presented. Is someone willing to affirm that motion?
Don't move. Oh, Jill?
Okay, Jill?
I'll second.
Denise will second that. Any discussion?
I I got, Carol, will that be the same material that's in there now, or will it be, I guess, is the technology improved over the years, or it's better?
I didn't have to phone a friend. He happens to be way over there in the room, and it's much better.
Okay.
Yes, the technology has improved.
I assumed that, but I didn't ask that question before, so.
I didn't either. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Any other discussion before we call the roll? Okay, hearing none, I will call for the roll. Denise?
Aye.
Jerry?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Bruce?
Aye.
Charles?
Aye.
Sharita?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you, Carol, for your briefing. Our next item of business is unfinished business, agenda item 9.01, equity and diversity strategic planning expansion. I'm going to ask John to give us a quick briefing before we consider the recommended action.
Thank you, Alina. And I think you're all very familiar with where we are in this process. So over the last 2 meetings, you've received large presentations from Ivania. First was and Nicole actually presented in the Equity and Diversity Advisory Council process that stretched us all the way back to last August with community engagement. That was followed up by Ivania's presentation of her entry plan and her report that included a listening learning tour and many other engagement opportunities. And it finalized with a recommendation for an expansion in the strategic plan for a focus area on equity and diversity and a new goal. And it's one of the things that we have not had a specific goal. We've had some strategies embedded into other goals. But as we continue to work to try and get better to serve all students under-resourced and underrepresented, a strategic focus, I believe, is something that this district needs to do next. We invested in that work by bringing a Chief Equity and Diversity Officer onto the team last year, and you supported that work. We feel like we've made some progress, but we've got a long ways to go. We've expanded training for our teams this year, required for all staff with resources that you've provided, as well as our senior leadership team, as well as additional investments into that department's work. Ivania outlined some specific strategies and actions that her team plans to help lead, and she doesn't do it in isolation, obviously. This is a group effort, but one of the things that we think is important as we deliver that is raising the level of accountability of that in our community and in front of our board. So this Focus Area 5 and strategic goal expansion allows us to do that. You'll get, just like you do on the other reports, regular updates. And you'll likely be asked for budget requests that align to the strategic plan accordingly. And you've supported those in the past with the Equity and Diversity Officer, where you just hired or in the process of hiring our coordinator position that you approved as part of last year's budget also. So that is helping us move forward in the workforce development area. But this is kind of the next step. Stephen's in the room with me, and if you remember, those who were on the board when we added his position to the team, we added a strategic focus area of communication and engagement, which you've seen the fruits of that effort and that focused strategic effort, I hope, in the last couple of years. So with that being said, I'm excited to recommend to you that we expand our strategic plan and put an intentional increased focus on equity and diversity by adopting this goal.
Thank you, John, for that briefing. Any questions or comments for John at this time?
Well, if we can have the same success we had with the last goal we added, we're going to be doing well. So I'm excited about the possibility of doing this one, getting this one going.
Thanks, Jerry. Any other questions or comments for John?
I just want to say thank you to Ivania as well as the team she had amassed to work with her on this. And I like what Jerry said. I agree. I'm glad we're doing this.
Thanks, Jill. Any other questions or comments for John?
Not necessarily for John, but just a shout out to Ivania. If you heard her on the SBJ thing this morning, she was terrific and I think represented SPS really, really well. I too think this is a really important moment. I mean, there's much hard work to do on the other side of this, but I think this is a significant first step. And I think it's powerful both symbolically as well as pragmatically. So I think this is a really, really important one.
Thank you, Charles. I'm going to move forward and read the recommended action at this time. The recommended action is that the board approves the recommendation of administration to add Focus Area 5, Equity and Diversity, and the related goal to the strategic plan. Is someone willing to affirm that motion?
So moved.
So,
Okay, Sharita, and then Charles, are you okay with the second?
you bet. Second.
Charles with the second. Any discussion? Hearing
I
none.
want to discuss that was Sharita's first motion, so yay for that.
You're funny, Jill, even at home. I will call the roll. Denise.
Aye.
Jerry.
Aye.
Jill.
Aye.
Bruce.
Aye.
Charles.
Aye.
Sharita.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. We look forward to seeing future reports of the demonstrated action moving forward. So thank you, board members, for that. Our next agenda item is 9.02, our transportation study update. And Carol will come back to the podium for our update.
Yeah.
Carol.
Oh, I see it here. Here it is. Okay. And go ahead and present.
No, actually, come up here, expand,
Share.
and then share your presentation.
Go down here.
And just share, and then hit present. Right.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, very good. Thank you, Bruce Douglas, again, for all of your assistance. So we've talked about transportation expansion a few times, and I will refresh your memory on a few of the data points that we've shared along the way through this presentation. So you will see similar information. This first slide indicates the state transportation requirements. So this is per Missouri statute. School districts in our state are required to provide students who live 3.5 miles from school with transportation services. And as we know, that level, that's the minimum, and that level can be reduced for additional services. So we can't, when I said minimum, I mean you can't go further than that in terms of the state statute. So currently our level provided is the 1.5 mile threshold for elementary and middle, and for our high school students it's 3.5 miles. They must live less than that. So the next information is a refresher for you again of our current buses, routes, and miles, and we're driving those miles in excess of 2 million each year. We have 132 routes for AM and PM. We're running 156 buses, not counting extra trips, and the department employs approximately 200 people, and that includes drivers and aides and nurses and other staff to support the work that takes place in the transportation operation. This shows you our ridership participation. We're just at 7,700 in both the fall and the spring ridership counts. And again, this information is the comprehensive information from the fiscal year 19. Approximately 30% of our students in Springfield Public Schools do ride the bus. The state funding information we provided you before helps unpack for you that while we have almost $9.7 million in total allowable costs, the state authorized reimbursement threshold is set at $5.8 million, and from that they were paying in FY19 $1.9 million. Our current budget is slightly reduced from that, and as Dr. Jungman referenced, there will be some additional information regarding some withholds for which we've been apprised. So the gap between the state authorized reimbursement level and that revenue that we have been receiving is about $3.9 million. And that's each year funds that could be utilized in other ways to support our students and our teachers educating them. The early childhood special education is a separate revenue source, and so those numbers previously provided do not cover early childhood special ed. We received 100% reimbursement, and those expenditures in FY19 were just over $1 million. So who is writing? We've provided for you before this information regarding grade span, and this illustrates for you that we do have, and I can't see the screen here, let me see if I can minimize that. We do have a gap in the high school area. So while only 15, if you look at this row for high schools overall, eligible to ride around 15%, not eligible to ride just over 13%, or not riding but eligible, I'm sorry, then not eligible to ride is just under 72%. So there is a gap larger than when you look at the other schools in terms of the participation levels. So we do believe that this matters. We've talked before with you during presentations about the gap that is a barrier primarily for our disadvantaged students, those in households where they don't have the ability to get kids to school as others may. So does it impact attendance? And again, we're providing for you information regarding attendance for riding eligible, not riding eligible, and not eligible to ride. I've circled for you the high school line. Again, when you compare riding eligible for the other grade levels, it's nearly identical. Elementary 94.5 to 94.5, middle school's 93.6 to 93.4, but the high school shows a gap in attendance. So there's a 2.8% gap from 93% for riding eligible, and attendance for not eligible to ride drops down to 90.2%. I've shared with you previously that our focus is on getting kids to school so they can be instructed. There is a secondary impact, and it is financial in nature, and that means that additional state funding through the foundation formula could be available if those students were attending that additional period of time, and that would be approximately $700,000. So next, we have for you information on, this would be the average daily attendance by category for full to free pay. So again, we don't see a lot of change between the elementary and middle levels from full pay lunch to a free lunch situation. But when you compare the riding participation levels of those students at the high school level, we again see another gap, a reduction of 5.3% riding eligible as compared to 7.4% for the not eligible to ride. This slide shows you the ridership boundaries that currently exist for the elementary departments, and that is at the 1.5 or greater threshold. So again, if the red area is showing the not bus eligible, you can see that we have some significant red areas noted on the slide. The yellow represents bus eligible for elementary students. The blue is barrier street eligible. We know that is relative to some safety considerations, so students aren't crossing high traffic areas and that type of thing. This is the middle school boundary depiction that shows, again, not bus eligible is that peach or red color. Again, 1.5 miles is the qualifier, and then yellow is eligible to ride for middle school. And this is the high school, which depicts clearly the excessive distance that students must live before they are eligible to receive transportation services from our district. So 3.5 miles is in the red color. The distance bus eligible is in the yellow color again. This provides you with a summary of our journey, and I provided early on for you when we first presented in that first meeting, and I believe it would have been in August, that this is relative to Focus Area 1 and Focus Area 3, where we are intending to deliver for our students. We're also wanting to ensure that we are providing an efficient operation, that it is financially sustainable, and primarily we knew that we had a gap in services provided, and particularly for disadvantaged families. And so that is part of the reason that we led a request for proposal August 28th of 2019. TransPar Group was selected October 15. They provided their report to the Board of Education during a public meeting January 21 of 2020. And since then, you've received 2 previous administrative updates. We did gather some additional information in between those 2 meetings in February, the 4th and the 18th. And then we've gathered additional information for you for this evening and have also the plan for proceeding. This is a familiar slide for you, and it was originally provided by the TransPar Group within their report and presentation during that January meeting. And the highlight for you within this is our statewide peer group, and our statewide peers are those larger districts in the state of Missouri, but also are more similar to us demographically. So their free and reduced lunch population would be more closely aligned with ours than some others. That's why they're on the list. As you can see in this, I've highlighted for you in yellow where we are an outlier. Our high school distance is 3.5 or more miles for qualifying for transportation services, and we are a 2-tier system. And elementary, we're an outlier from others. We are at 1.5, whereas others are 1 mile. And I should have mentioned on high school, others are at the most 2 miles for qualifying. This slide shows you our regional peers, and again, these are those districts that are closest around us. And again, we're an outlier for the high school distance at 3.5 or more. We are more similar with the tiers because these are smaller districts. They're not dealing with the urban setting that we have in terms of providing transportation services. So that's not surprising that a smaller school district would have fewer tiers. This is restating the information that TransPar provided to you at the January 21st meeting. And there were 2 primary targeted areas for their study. And they've identified that if we were to move the high school boundaries to 1.5 miles from 3.5, that would carry a cost estimate between $2.2 to $3.7 million. And for additional services, for the magnet programs, and again, this is about removing barriers for students so that all of our students can equally participate, that would carry a price point of $1.7 million for those particular magnet programs. So again, the total for these 2 services to be implemented with no change to the tier structure would be nearly $4 million up to $5.4 million. Again, the TransPar report provided these bell schedule options. So, and that was part of the conversation during our last meeting with regard to securing additional structures. So this shows our current bell schedule and tiers and times, and then the middle school, high school, elementary example, and the high school, elementary, middle school example. And in each case, it's showing the number of buses required. It's showing the range of potential costs for the high school change and also for the magnet change. And then the bottom line there is a total cost. So we can see here that rather than being $4 million to $5.4 million, if we retained our current 2-tier structure, adding an additional tier would reduce that increase to $850,000 to just over $1 million for either of those 2 scenarios. So we did go back to the TransPar group, and they provided us additional information. And this slide shows you that information. So I'm going to pause for a bit on this since we're providing you new information. As you can see, the number of buses required is indicated for each scenario, and they provided a best case, mid case, and worst case scenario because there are a number of factors involved. I'll mention again that one of the highlights from the TransPar group is that we are currently running a very efficient transportation program, and they could not find any additional efficiencies where we could tweak and pull different levers to affect the change needed. So the real only option that they recommended was that we would add another tier for our bus services. So as you can see in this example, the total costs for these other scenarios is indicated, and it ranges from high school, middle school, elementary structure at $850,000 to $1,028,000. And then the highest one, other than our current structure, would be going with elementary, high school, middle school, because of the number of buses required and also the staffing to support it. So that would carry a $2.3 to $2.9 million increase for these additional services.
So I think, Charles, you specifically had asked about high school last, what would happen if it was in the last position. So we asked them to go back and create the best scenario with all sequencing options. So we had the two previous, and then here are the other sequencing options and the best financial scenario for a multi-tier with those sequencing. So it gives us just a few additional data points as we work towards future recommendations.
Duly noted and appreciated. Thank you.
Certainly. So moving forward, a reminder again, we know that there are many stakeholders in making a change like this, making a recommendation for a change like this. So it doesn't just impact the students and the staff, it impacts the parents and also our before and after partners. We need to consider the instructional time impact, and also extracurricular activities would come into play. And so we know that we need to approach this in a very deliberate fashion, and I believe some of the words shared by board members was not rush it, but not take longer than necessary during one of our previous meetings. So to that end, the recommendation we have for you this evening is that we would, for 2021, so this is the upcoming school year, we recommend making that slight change that can be quite impactful for elementary students, where we would reduce the mileage threshold from 1.5 to 1 mile. And think of it this way, those buses are on their way to those schools anyway. So this is about adding a few stops, adding a few minutes. It comes with a very low price point for us to be able to do that and go ahead and affect change in the upcoming school year. Additionally, we propose that we would continue. We had the pilot for the Campbell Elementary Childhood Center. We recommend replicating that at Fulbright and also at Shady Dell Early Childhood Centers. That means we would have those 3 early childhood center transportation zones, and we anticipate between 30 to 60 additional students would participate. On the elementary side, that would impact approximately 700 students potentially. Also, we have a few alternative program changes for elementary and middle, and that is connected with Studi Alternative School, and that can result in some savings. So the overall net projected budget impact of all of this on this screen is $125,000. I'll move forward. This would be the impact of changing the ridership boundaries for elementary. So on the left side of your screen, you can see the existing elementary not bus eligible and eligible, again, the red and the yellow. And then you can see on the right side of the screen, if we reduce that to 1 mile, the impact that that has, freeing up a number of students to be eligible to ride on buses. This shows you the early childhood center zones, if you will. So again, the red represents not bus eligible, and we would again apply the 1.0 mile threshold for these students. So that opens that opportunity up for them. Again, the early childhood centers are for our free and reduced lunch students that qualify, and so this would be serving disadvantaged families. This is our comprehensive recommendation in terms of moving forward with a work group, and this work group would be assigned and established by administration to make recommendation of a 3-tier system that thoroughly vets with these students, parents, teachers, and other members of administration and those community partners, including our before and after providers, what would best serve Springfield Public Schools and the community. So the primary goal, again, would be to expand ridership for students in grades 9 through 12, and also magnet program access while limiting increased financial demand on the district. This group we envision would start up in August and hopefully be able to provide a recommendation to administration by mid-November, November 15th. So given that, this shows you the impact of potential future changes for the ridership for the high school level if that change were to be affected in the next school year, not FY21, but beyond that, a significant amount of our geographic territory would be opened up and be providing for students. So the not bus eligible would be that in the red on the right side that is much more diminished. Reduces it down to 1.5 miles. So the work group recommendation that would increase riding eligibility, we would recommend the following that are identified in this listing. So again, developing and deploying that third tier for bus pickup and drop off. We would be looking at start and end times for each campus and program, and also grade levels that should be included in the tier. So to the point addressed earlier, there are a variety of options in terms of which group starts when and ends in terms of the tier structure. This group would outline the projected impact on academic programs for students and also the before and after care programs and extracurricular programming. There would be an outline of the impact for students, parents, and staff and community. Again, implemented costs not to exceed the $1.5 million in new operational costs, and that's a topic that we have covered during some of these previous presentations. Defining those of additional campus investments potentially or other capital investments. So in one of the presentations, I provided you some information regarding potential impact to drop-off lanes and parking lots, and much of that is out of our control, and truly we wouldn't know the impact that additional transportation opportunities might provide, but it would be something to take into consideration. So, and then finally outline a recommended timeline for the implementation and certainly a communication strategy that is all-encompassing for our stakeholders. I believe that gets us to the end. Have any questions?
Okay, thank you, Carol. Are there any questions or comments for Carol at this point?
I don't have a question, but I want to thank you for that. I really think it's an important goal to make attendance more accessible for people, so thank you.
Carol, it's Jerry. I got a couple questions.
Sure.
One comment first is, yeah, thank you for the study. As you know, I'm very supportive of what the recommendations you got here to shorten it and doing it at the prudent time to make sure we do it when we can afford it and at the right time. The question I had deals with the impact of shortening these distances. Like right now we got 70% eligibility or ineligible for high school, 71%, something like that. By doing this, one, what would it take that? And you may not have these numbers right now, I understand. And it's more curiosity than anything, because one of the things I was thinking of is kids turn 16 in high school, they're going to drive anyway. So what's the reality of the students that this is going to impact? Let me preface the caveat. I do think we should shorten the distance to 1.5. I'm totally in favor of that. I'm just looking for the potential impact and audience of what kind of ridership do we think we would increase by shortening that and going there. And I'm totally in favor of the 1 mile elementary. We should have done that a long time ago, but that's a good thing. But the high school, because it does impact attendance, like Jill said, that's a positive thing. But what do we think the impact might be as far as ridership and that kind of thing? Do you know?
I have no real idea. Dr. Johnson, do you have an opinion on that? I mean, we can look.
Yeah, we had some data in the original, and I can't recall it off the top of my head. We can follow up. We can certainly follow up, but in the original slide deck back from TransPar, they calculated the uptake rate of current high school kids that are eligible, right? So of that small population, that 30% that is eligible, 1% are riding, right? So use that as a baseline of minimum, thinking that a lot of the same percentage would probably play out at the high school for those kids between 1.5 and 3.5. And then we also calculated the middle school uptake rate of those campuses, because those 7th and 8th graders are more like freshmen and sophomores. Yeah. And when they budgeted, they really took the difference between those two. because we had to come up with an agreement, because we can't agree that every kid that gains eligibility at the high school is going to ride. That would take this through the roof, and that's not a realistic projection. So the actual projection we built off is somewhere in the middle of those two, what the actual uptake rate of current eligible students are riding and the middle school eligible students that are riding, because it's already at the 1.5 barrier. And I think we split the difference.
We did. Remember we split the difference, but I can't remember the numbers of them.
And that's why I don't need the numbers. I was just sitting there thinking when you were talking about, a bunch of these kids are still driving, are going to drive. And so even though they're eligible, they're not going to ride anyway. And so that didn't change my mind at all as far as the recommendation. I think one of the things is Bruce and I have been through this before. This sounds like kind of an easy decision, and it's not as easy as it sounds to change start times, to do the things we want to do. And it's going to be a tough thing to implement overall. And I think it's the right thing to do, but it's not going to be without, honestly, some pushback at some point. And I think we just need to hold fast that this is the right thing for kids financially and for their benefit also.
I think what we heard from you at the last meeting is everybody agrees this is a really good thing to do and the right thing to do, but it has substantial disruption. So
yes, it does.
You guys provided us guardrails, right? And those were kind of what was represented in that last slide with the guardrails and the feedback. And now we want to engage the community in a deeper conversation about, here are the guardrails, here's what we're trying to get done, how's the best way to do it? It's going to hurt, right? There's no way to get there without some pain. But is there less painful ways to make that happen? So.
Yeah.
While increasing eligibility may not account for a huge number of ridership for all high school students, there is an overrepresentation of the under-resourced students in that group.
Absolutely.
Who will affect it significantly, which aligns also with the new goal that we added to the strategic plan.
Yeah,
exactly right.
So
true.
True.
Prioritizing funds for that, I think is important.
This is true equity work, right? And transportation was built into some of the conversations that Ivania had with you before, and no different than what Carol talked about with the early childhood centers as we open up Fulbright and as we now have 3 full centers plus our hub classrooms. It's really important that we expand that transportation access for those students also.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
my question is what is, I mean, I got the presentation. So there's a dollar amount for the 2021 school year of 125,000? Is that the dollar amount?
Yeah.
And then the other dollar amount is based on the work group and their recommendation during the fall. So, but when will we have to decide on the 125,000? I'm just telling you from experience, it's not that all these things aren't good, and maybe things will change as quickly to the good as they change to the bad. But if they don't, every time you commit funds that are continuing, you take the power out of the hands of the next board. Because I'm going to tell you, it's hard to, once you give it, it's real hard to take it away. So I think this transportation is, once we decide to what we're going to do, that's going to be continuous funding. And all of a sudden, you've said to next boards, you can't consider that as any of your priorities. It's already been committed to. So I think the work group is good because we may know more in the fall about finances going forward, but the 125 is all that's asked for 2021.
Correct.
Yeah, and that will be part of the June budget presentation. So you'll see that at the study session of the recommendations for expenditures for the upcoming year.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bruce, I appreciate your contextual comment. Charles, you wanted to share something.
Yeah, I think this is a really great example of sort of proceeding incrementally. I think it's really smart. I think It expands fairly quickly the equity of access to the magnet programs. I think that's important in terms of equity. I think reducing that walking distance at the elementary level, if death was not an option, I had to pick one thing to do. I think doing that now makes a great deal of sense. And honestly, I really, really like the working group, because we would have had to really make it up on the fly if we were going to try to implement something this fall. And quite candidly, this fall is, my guess, going to be unlike any other fall that we're likely to encounter for a very long time. So anything we would assume to be true about this fall may or may not be representative of what the new normal, with apologies for overusing that overused cliche, whatever that new normal turns out to be. So I think this is a really good first start. Thank you.
I have just a short comment, but are there any other questions or comments for Carol at this time? I'm going to affirm what a couple other board members shared, which is the ongoing conversation of looking at risk versus reward. And I would just say that I applaud the fact that you're looking at a low financial risk in this first step, and yet the reward for elementary students is great. So I just want to applaud that first step. And then also, as other board members have said as well, just affirming the work group. And we know that as whether the board or whether administration has created those type of task force, we know that there's always great feedback and strong recommendations that will come from that group. So I look forward to that, and it will be very complex, as we know. So thank you. There is no vote at this time. It's just a briefing or update about the step one for next year's budget, and then the work group that will be proposed to be in place during next calendar year. Any other questions or comments before we move forward? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is 9.03, the FY21 budget development, general and teacher funds, and we will continue with Carol at the podium.
Oh, yeah, you're watching me, aren't you? Okay. This mouse is hard to get to control.
Even though we can't see Bruce, we know he's there.
He's here. Huh? I'm going to click that one. Just share and minimize this and present that. Off we go. Thank you. Okay, this is the culmination of many budget presentations to help you recenter your thinking in terms of what it is that we deal with for our budget development process. This provides you with a list of presentations to date, and highlighting for you that June 9th will be that official budget presentation for the 2020-2021 school year, and then we will seek your approval June 23rd. Budgets must be approved prior to any funds being expended, so we'll need that to be approved by June 30 every year. The slide reminds you of the 5 separate funds plus 2 fiduciary funds, and this evening we're going to talk about the general fund and the teacher fund. So within the general fund, we do have 2 sub-funds, and one is food service and the other is student activities. The general fund and teacher fund comprise the operating fund. So when we talk every month about our fund balance percentage, that's the operating fund balance percentage, and it's a combination of the balance in those 2 accounts and divided by the expenditures of those 2 funds. So the sources for operating funds always represents the carryover fund balance. We also have a variety of revenues on the local, county, state, and federal levels that are deposited into the operating funds, and we'll provide you more revenue detail during the June presentation. Operating funds are mostly spent on salary and benefits, so nearly 80% of our operating fund expenditures are covering our people. You can see in this slide that 62% of that is salaries, 18% is benefits, and the combined total there is just over $227 million. This slide shows you the position types. So 74% of our employees are certificated and 26% are classified or not certificated staff members, not in the instructional world. We've included for you again the total dollars on gross pay for each of those position types. And this information does not include temporary positions. Our benefited employees is 97% of our employee population. We have noted here 3,473 benefited employees. These are employees generally working 20 hours or more per week. Then they qualify for benefits in Springfield Public Schools. We have technically two retirement types. There was a third one that was added by PSRS a few years back. And PEERS is for those non-certificated employees. PSRS covers certificated employees. PSRSS is a new retirement that was developed for people who hold a teaching certificate, but they're working in a position that does not require it. This shows you the retirement rates, and I've noted for you here that the rates have remained the same since the 2011-2012 school year. So we have enjoyed consistent rates from the retirement systems for many, many years now. And PSRS is 14.5%, PSRSS is 9.67% because those people also contribute to FICA and Medicare. And then the PEERS system is 6.86%. Anyone who was hired, I believe it was prior to, maybe I had that on another slide. Yes, I have it here. Anyone hired prior to April 1st, 1986 does not pay Medicare, but we have very few people in that category now. So as people retire, that number diminishes, and all of our teaching staff or all people who participate in PSRS also pay Medicare, which is a good thing for them because then they qualify for Medicare coverage as they age. The collective bargaining information is noted here. We negotiate with our groups between February 1st up to June 1st. Actually, all recommendations are to be finalized prior to June 1st, and those recommendations will be presented to you during the June 23 meeting. These are the groups that are represented within Springfield Public Schools. There, again, are 5 total units, and 4 of those are part of NEA. The first one noted is teacher, librarian, and counselor. Then there is a school nurse division, a support personnel that includes those staff members listed, maintenance, custodial, and transportation center. And then lastly, our secretarial clerical group. The Teamsters unit covers our bus drivers and bus aides. This shows you a percentage breakdown of the coverage, and I'll highlight for you that in addition to those 5 bargaining units, the non-union portion is represented as 28% of our employees. This provides you with a breakdown of the different types of pay. So we have regular base pay. We also have a variety of categories, including overtime and miscellaneous, and these are all breakouts as required by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. There's an accounting manual, and they provide us with all these different object codes where we break the salaries into. Same way with benefits, we separate out, and all of this ultimately is provided for you each month in some of those routine financial reports that are uploaded, but also in the ASBR, the annual financial report to the state of Missouri. We have a variety of breakdowns that are reflected with some of these different GL codes, general ledger codes. So again, this is for benefits and shows you those retirements. I'll note that workers' compensation and unemployment for a system of our size, those numbers have historically been very low. Purchase services and supplies comprise 8% and 12% respectively. And again, the bulk of operating funds are processed as salary and benefits. So you can see that the purchase services covers those work projects that we must outsource. They can cover professional development or training. Anytime we need to call in another professional to perform the work and they're not part of our employee base, then we would consider those a purchase service. This shows you a breakdown of some of those primary categories, and not surprising, we have a number of support services because that area would comprise transportation costs, it would comprise some nutrition services costs, and the direct classroom impact then would be the next largest category. Those again are breakouts that are required by the state of Missouri. This shows you a breakdown again of the different categories, and the top 5 total just over $17.8 million, and that's 76% of our purchase services budget. And not surprising, one of the top 2 there is substitute services, because we do outsource that, just over $5 million budgeted in the current year. The other categories represent various trainings and communication. So this again is another view of that information that was previously presented. And this breaks it down by particular work area. So custodial and grounds, building and maintenance. Instructional is a fairly large area for purchase services. And then again, the other support services that were listed previously. So now we'll talk about supplies. Supplies, most of our supply budget is instructional in nature. That's not surprising at all, 70%. We also have supplies to support our nutrition services program, and things like parts and fuel and that type of thing for our buses would be included in the supply budget. You can see the breakdown again by the primary categories for the state: instruction, support, and community services. And again, our primary category is support services. And important to note, support services includes other things such as counseling and professional development. Those categories fall within support services. So for instance, the 1% professional development money that we spend each year to help educate our teaching staff is represented within those areas. This shows you a chart of those costs, and again, not surprising, food supplies would be number 2 at $5.4 million for costs. Utilities comes in 3rd, and that's not surprising either. Again, another view of that information. And again, by primary category. So that is the final information for you with regard to budget development before we get into our official recommendations at the June 9th meeting. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you, Carol. Any questions or comments for Carol before we move forward? That was a great overview, Carol. Thank you very much.
Hey, very good.
We're going to move forward with our agenda, and our next agenda item is agenda item 10.01, which is our bond project updates and actions. And the first action item is change orders, bids, and agreements. And at this time, we have Travis coming up to the podium.
Well, hello and good evening. Seems like it's been forever.
That's right.
Call on this camera. So
that's right. Carol's a little bit shorter, huh?
So first item, as you're used to seeing, are the change orders, bids, and agreements. The last meeting that we had was about a month ago, so you'll recognize a lot of items within this category. A few things that I do want to point out to you that are fairly large. The main one is for the Fulbright Early Childhood Center. You'll notice that we have a change order of $169,555. The original design for the building was to have a service kitchen, which essentially meant we were going to prepare all the meals at Carver, and we would then bring the meals over to the Early Childhood Center and then deliver them that way. And as we begin to look into the cost comparison to do that, as well as to what would it cost to actually put a full kitchen in place, there was not a lot of difference in the equipment cost. We were going to have to buy several pieces of equipment for Carver to add to that kitchen, as well as the transportation needed to get the meals over. And so when we began to look at the comparisons, it just made more sense to move forward with a full kitchen. That way everything's done on site and we're able to better serve the kids at that facility. And so we knew that we would have a change order for this. We just didn't know exactly which way we were going to go from the very beginning. So that's why that one was there. And you have a couple others for Fulbright that are in the $13,000, $14,000 range. These are actually the first significant change orders that we've actually had for the Fulbright Early Childhood Center. I think up to this point, we've only had a little over $6,000. So you can go through those. I'm not going to go through line items, but again, as a reminder on package 4, secure entrances, the reason there is not a contingency budget is because when that one actually came in over the allotted budget. Therefore, everything that we spend out of that comes from an additional contingency for all of the bond projects. So I'd be happy to answer any questions for you at this time.
Thank you, Travis. Are there any questions or comments for Travis at this time?
Travis, one question on going to the full kitchen. Will that impact staffing at all?
It was going to impact staffing either way. Gary, we were going to have to add a couple staff members, whether we prepare at Carver or not. They don't eat the same foods, and so it would be a completely separate menu. And so no different than what we were already going to have.
Okay, good.
Any other questions or comments for Travis? Travis, I appreciate you diving into those specifics, specifically with Fulbright. Helps give us a little bit more context. I'm going to go ahead and read the recommended action at this time. The recommended action is that the board approve the change orders and agreements as presented. Does someone want to affirm that motion?
So moved.
Jill with the first. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Denise with the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Denise.
Aye.
Jerry.
Aye.
Jill.
Aye.
Bruce.
Aye.
Charles.
Aye.
Sharita.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Our next agenda item, Travis will still remain, is the Boyd construction bid.
So pleased to present this bid to you. This has been a lot of work in progress, and on May 5th for the Boyd Elementary School, we did receive 6 general contractors bids for this particular project. As a reminder, this project has a total project budget of $20,340,000, and we estimated that construction budget to be $143,394. The bids came in very tight. We only had a difference of 3% between the low and the high bid. The apparent low bidder is Bailey Pyle. They're located locally here in Southwest Missouri out of Rogersville. The bid did come in slightly over what our estimate was at $16,306,900. But what I do want to mention is in all of our projects, we have included inflation dollars, and this one had inflation of $968,604 added to the total project budget, which is going to allow this project to come in well within budget. So the recommendation for me at this time would be to accept the bid from Bailey Powell Builders for the total price of $16,306,900 to start construction on the new Boyd Elementary School.
Any questions or comments for Travis at this time? I think it's great that we had 6 bids come in for Boyd. Is that correct?
Yes, there was a lot of interest. We actually had 7 contractors that did pick up plans, and then within the last couple of days, one of them decided to back out. But yeah, great interest, great competition, which is evident of the bids being so close.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the 3% differential between all the bids just exemplifies the quality of work that Travis and his team have done to prepare to get to that point. You get a bid spread that small, the plans, the process is really good.
Thank you, Jerry. Any other questions or comments before I read the recommended action? Okay, the recommended action is that the board approve the construction contract as presented. Is someone willing to affirm that motion?
So moved.
Jerry, is there a second?
Second.
Oh, I think I heard Charles first. Charles with the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Denise.
I don't see her.
I'm here.
Okay.
I had a little trouble with my internet. Aye.
Jerry.
Aye.
Jill.
Aye.
Bruce.
Aye.
Charles.
Aye.
Sharita.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Our next agenda item is the cross-access easements. Travis, would you please present that to us?
Sure. So as you'll see, there's a very lengthy motion that's been provided to us from legal, which we always receive on any of our easements. This is the first cross-access easement that I've presented. You may recall on the west alleyway that we've just recently received approval on vacating that alley from the city. There was a city utilities easement, there was a sanitary sewer easement, and there was also a fiber easement with AT&T Southwestern Bell. This cross-access easement essentially allows both parties, the property owner as well as the school district, to have access either way on that easement. The reason we need this is because there are two property owners on the south part of that alley that currently had access to the alley, whether it's from a parking lot, there's a business there, or whether it's through an open gate on their property, or simply access to their property via the alley. We did not want to take that away from them if we didn't have to, but still to be able to protect that alleyway. That's the area where our buses will come in. And so by doing this and having this set up and working with our civil engineers, we are able to accommodate both or all three of those property owners, but still prevent traffic from going in and out of that alleyway throughout the day to keep our students and staff safe. And so that's the purpose for why these cross-access easements are necessary.
Thank you, Travis. Any questions or comments for Travis at this point? Travis, do you have the ability, can you read us the motion?
I would be happy to.
This is a test.
I can relax. That the board authorize and approve granting cross-access easements by the school district to certain neighboring properties located on the west side of the alley that is being vacated for the new Boyd Elementary School on its west side. The easements cover the east one half of the alley that will be owned by the district after the alley is vacated by the city of Springfield. The easements will be granted to Spellman, Duke, and 102 Glenstone Incorporated. A condition and requirement for completion of the granting and delivery of the easements is receipt of signed cross-access easements from all these landowners for the opposite side of the alley. The president of the Board of Education is authorized and directed to execute these easement documents on behalf of the school district.
Thank you. Would somebody be willing to affirm that motion?
So moved.
Charles, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Jerry. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Denise.
Aye.
Jerry.
Aye.
Jill.
Aye.
Bruce.
Aye.
Charles.
Aye.
Rita.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Our next agenda item is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Travis, back to you.
Sure. So we just have a few things tonight. There are some additional file cabinets that were not included in the original HON bid that you had approved earlier for a small amount of $3,423.26 for Delaware. There's also some additional ramps that were needed for the playground at Delaware from Park Planet. These accommodate the ADA access that's needed. And then there are the FF&E for the interior and exterior activity spaces for the Fulbright Early Childhood Center. There's a lot of activity spaces within the building, as well as underneath covered areas outside that go beyond just playground. And so that one is for $105,384.94. You'll see that the availability in those FF&E budgets is still very healthy. And so there's plenty of money to accommodate these expenses.
Thank you for that additional context. Any questions or comments for Travis? Okay, hearing none, the recommended action is that the board approve the furniture, fixtures, and equipment purchases as presented. Do I have someone willing to affirm that?
I'll make that motion.
Denise, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Bruce. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Denise.
Aye.
Jerry.
Aye.
Jill.
Aye.
Bruce.
Aye.
Charles.
Aye.
Sharita.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Our next agenda item is the quarterly bond update. Travis, we are looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, give me just a second so I can make sure I share this screen correctly.
You bet.
Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, so here we are 3 months later, and it's amazing to me when I went through and edited and put this presentation together, the difference in actually what's happened on the construction sites and the pictures that I shared for you 3 months ago. So you should get a good idea of where we are on these projects. So again, as we go through this, you'll notice that we have the 7 main projects that we will discuss, as well as where we are on the secure entrances. As always, I like to show the draft project sequencing plan. This just gives you the visual of what we're working on. Remember, the green represents what's actually under construction, and the yellow is the design process. And so the second column there is the 1920, so you can see there's a great deal of work that's taking place there. In project updates, to give you a better idea, under construction, as you know, we've got the Fulbright Early Childhood Center, Delaware Elementary, and Sunshine Elementary. Although we have had some scheduling challenges due to the higher than average precipitation since we began last fall, as well as this spring, and then also some unforeseen delays that we've dealt with COVID-19. All of these projects are expected to be ready for staff and students this fall. We are going to start construction per your approval on Boyd Elementary. That will actually begin June 1st. I apologize, that's an error in text. And then we are in the construction drawing process for Jarrett Middle School, Hillcrest, and Williams. So on our secure entrances, again, this is the sequencing plan. We have 14 that we're currently working on and are scheduled to be finished by the time school gets started. And again, this is a slide you've seen many times. The yellow represents those that we've completed, and then the others that we're working on. So just some pictures, and what I want to give you an idea, if you've not been in these buildings, what I tried to do is be able to show you what the new entrances will look like. And so this is Wilder, and this is from the hallway looking toward the entrance, and you can see the new set of double doors that creates the new vestibule that will require all staff to come in from that area where that construction worker currently is, and they will go through the office to be checked in before they're then allowed into the building. The same one for McBride. If you look from where we're looking at the hallway into the secure entrance, again, it takes you into the office and then would come out that open door there once they've been vetted through the process. Example from Holland. So even though we have a lot of different schools, you can see that the design is very similar, even though the buildings themselves are different. This is from the inside of the office, actually, at Disney, looking into what would be the new entrance area. And then Watkins, we actually had to flip the office space where it currently is due to where the classroom was on the other side. This one was a little bit more complex. And then you can also see with Truman, a lot of construction that had to take place there due to how that entrance was currently set up. So as we look at Fulbright Early Childhood Center, a reminder of what the building will look like once it's completely finished. And you will see this is the view from that area. They've started the curb and guttering, and I think by now they've actually probably put some asphalt down. And so working diligently, and you can see the shape of how that building's coming along. This is a view from the north side, and you can see the 2-level exposure to that, and an idea of what some of the materials are on the outside. So a beautiful building. It's going to be great for our kids and staff there. And then this is just a shot of where we've got some finished work going on. So a lot taking place, scheduled to be done first part of August. Delaware Elementary, again, a view from Delaware Street. And you can see that's the front entrance. That's the last part of construction. That's what they've called Area A, which is the main office and main entrance next to the storm shelter. Everything else has already been closed in. You can see an example of what the exterior finish with brick can look like. This is one of the collaboration spaces in between classrooms, lots of natural light coming in, and just will be a great atmosphere for our kids. And this is an example of one of the classrooms that they have just recently painted and will begin working on sealing. Sunshine Elementary, this is again the view from Jefferson. You get an idea of the new entrance. That will be the new main entrance of the building. This is an interior shot of the cafeteria. It will have exposed beams, which will be a beautiful space for our kids and staff. And they have completely demoed the interior part of the building. So you have an idea of what is left behind from a 100-year-old space in some of those areas. And this is what was the existing cafeteria. And as they have shut down systems, all of those tiles have begun to fall almost daily. And so we won't see that ceiling, we promise you. So Boyd Elementary, just a quick update. As you know, this is what the exterior of the building will look like off of Division Street. And then just a quick overview of the budget and the timeline. So we will be finished with this in July of next year, ready to move in August of 2021. Jarrett Middle School, again, will be on the Portland site. And that's an aerial shot of that particular campus and then the view from Portland Street. We do have some interior renderings that they were able to provide. This is what looks to be outside of an art room space. So lots of air. It's not going to look anything like the current Jarrett Middle School, which we will all love and appreciate. This is an example of the library space, and then a corridor where we have classrooms on each side, but also collaboration space. Again, here's our timeline. The demo will start this summer at Portland, and then we'll begin construction this fall. And this is a 2-year project. It's the largest project that we've got on phase 1, and we'll be ready to move in August 2022. Williams Elementary. Again, this is the site plan for Williams. We'll be adding additional looping for our pre-K on the west side, as well as increased parking and a different bus loop. Floor plan as well. And so this is the exterior. This would be the corner at Kearney Street. So you can get an idea of the entrance of that. These are some images from the inside. To the left, you can see the library space, and then on down it goes to the art room. This is the early childhood space. We've got some breakout rooms, as well as around that right corner would be collaboration space and classrooms. And this is another one of the collaboration spaces that you get natural light in, and then it goes into the classroom. So really excited about this project and getting it underway. Again, this summer we'll start demolition at Williams. It is a 12-month project. These students will go over to the former Sherwood site on Scenic and ready to move into that building in August of 2021. And Hillcrest. Again, this is a phase 1 project. This is an example of what you've seen before on the exterior, and some ideas of what the inside will look like. This is a library space, lots of different color, updated, really bright. The main common area space. We don't see old concrete floors anymore, which I think everybody will love. And then example of corridor space. So lots of great Hillcrest High School pride within this project. And a reminder on this project, it is also a 2-year project scheduled to start this summer and be finished by the time they go into school in August 2022. And as progress promised, we have a video to be able to show you of what the progress has been over the last 9 months. I think that's it. So I think I'm going to stop sharing at this point.
Okay, thank you, Travis. I'm going to see if there's any questions or comments for Travis at this time. I think this is always one of the highlights after approving change orders and that type of thing along the way at each board meeting to finally get to see a visual that you get to see on a regular basis, but to bring that to us, it's very rewarding. A lot of hard work that is going into those projects, and to see secure entrances and storm shelters. When I think about the improved safety for our kids, as somebody mentioned earlier, they're learning more about turf than they ever wanted to learn. I just think about, you know, thinking about a storm shelter and really just being excited about that for our kids and our community and our teachers. So Jill, were you going to make a comment?
Yes, and you essentially said what I was going to say. I'm a very visual thinker, Travis, and I really appreciate you giving us some concrete or non-concrete, as the case may be, examples. Two of my children's grade schools were represented there, and it's fun to see the upgrades to those. So thank you very much. That's really exciting.
Well, we have a great team. Stephen's communication team and our project managers are doing great work to be able to put this out to the public and give updates. It's a lot of work to do all that drone footage, but every 3 months we want to be able to show that. And I'm excited that the next quarterly update will be August 18th. And so it gets a little emotional when I think about that. So I'm excited about that one.
That's right, Travis. We are accountable to the people, and we're accountable to our students and staff. So it's very rewarding. We can sense that from you. Any other questions or comments for Travis before we move forward? Okay, hearing none. Thank you so much, Travis. We appreciate all that you brought to us tonight. And
Denise,
John,
Denise had her hand up. I don't know if you could see her or not.
Yeah, can you hear me or hear me?
I can hear you.
Am I here? I think, am I muted?
Yeah.
Okay, am I muted?
No.
No, we can hear you.
Well, I'm having a little, seems like I'm kind of coming in and out. But anyway, you know, having started this way back with the facilities task, so when all this was just thinking and people were thinking and brainstorming and coming up with these ideas and then prioritizing and then seeing this to where we are today and then seeing what we're going to be in a couple more years and actually seeing it is just, I don't know that I exactly have the words to say, other than as I'm watching, you know, my watch just told me I needed to breathe. So I'm thinking that probably means that I just don't have the words to say how much this means to me and to, I think, many members of the community that served on that task force, and then to just imagine what's still ahead for us. So I know so much hard work has gone into this. We always say that, so much hard work, but it's just unbelievable how much work has gone on in the last 2 years. So again, I guess I better stop and breathe. So it's extremely emotional and it's extremely rewarding and very exciting. So great work to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise.
Well, this is a waste of you guys' time, but I don't want to get in trouble with my children. Let me be clear. There were 2 different schools, but all 3 of my children's grade schools were represented there. So let me be clear about that. Sorry.
Thank you for the technical clarification. Yes. Here, seeing no one else raising their hand for a comment, I'm going to ask my fellow board members at this time, before we move on to our next agenda item, would anybody like to propose that we take a 5-minute break before our next agenda item? Let's see, Denise with a thumbs up. I'm just checking in because it's a little bit after 7 and we have a report, a mid-year update report. So, okay, we can take a 5-minute break. We would leave our videos and our laptops on, and Pam can mute us collectively, I believe. We should also make sure that we are individually muted. And it is 7:06 according to my iPhone. So I will start us back in 5 minutes. Any questions before we move forward? Maybe Pam's already muted you, so maybe there are no questions. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break real quick. Okay, John, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. It's 7:12, and so we will move forward. And our next agenda item is agenda item 11.01, which is Focus Area 2, Goal 1, Mid-Year Update. And John, can you please introduce our speakers tonight?
Sure, glad to do that. As you know, our typical process is spring, we come in with mid-year updates, and fall, we dive deep into each of our strategic areas with a large white paper and a pretty comprehensive slide deck. In the spring, really, we try to keep that to 20 slides or less and 20 minutes, right, to just give you a brief update on the progress and what's been going on this year. And we'll do the same thing tonight. We have Penny and Nicole to report on Focus Area 2 Goal 1. This really has a lot to do with personnel as well as professional learning. And we would ask, kind of like what we've made the norm at the last few meetings, if you have questions, we'd be glad to answer those at the end of this, and they'll be available, but they'll run through a little bit of information, and you have both the slide deck and a summary report at your computer location. So we'll get it moving to Penny.
Okay, well, on behalf of Dr. Holt and myself, I want to thank you for having us this evening, and we want to let you know that we're here to share information with you, but we do have a strong team behind us who engage in this work every day, and we want to thank them for their efforts. And they also assisted in preparing the written report as well as the summary that we have for you this evening. So we are here to provide you with an update on Focus Area 2 Goal 1, which is ensuring that we have empowered and effective teachers, leaders, and support personnel in our district. We have 4 focus areas, but with your decision this evening, we will be adding that 5th area to support equity and diversity, and are excited to have more information about that moving forward. And a quick reminder of our goal under Focus Area 2. It's all about empowering our employees while providing access to those qualified and effective teachers, leaders, and support personnel in every position in our district. To support that goal, we have identified 8 strategies that Dr. Holt and I will provide you with a summary of the highlights and next steps for this evening. And the first of those is 2.1.1, and that is Dr. Holt, and I will turn the podium over to her.
Thank you, Penny, and good evening, guys. It's great to see each one of you tonight. I've seen some of you already this week, but excited to see the rest of you. So strategy 2.1.1, as a reminder, is really around the supports we provide to those newest to the system. So that would be our new teachers as well as our new leaders. So that would include our programming pieces around new teacher induction, step up, evolving leaders, and the support provided by new teacher liaisons across the system. So a couple highlights there. We typically report to you the hours of support. Remember that step up support received in years 1 and 2 for our early career teachers is ongoing, but we also realize that we have teachers that fall into the band of coming to us from other systems that aren't in their first 2 years. And so we also utilize new teacher liaisons at sites. We have 58 of those currently that are providing that 812 hours. So just for your knowledge, the 972 hours is really in support of 81 first-year teachers, and then the 656 is speaking to the support provided to 82 teachers in their second year. A highlight of this year, obviously, has been our partnership with Leadership Springfield in creating a customized class to support early career educators in making some connections to the community at the onset of their career. And so we were able to provide that this fall in October in partnership with Leadership Springfield. We received numerous amounts of positive feedback relative to that, just about classroom impact and expanding beyond the walls of the classroom to build networks of support for our kids and for our families, both in SPS and in the community. So next steps for this particular strategy have to do with always refinement of programming. While we are continually getting positive feedback about the early career supports we provide to both teachers and leaders, we are not stagnant in making adjustments and changes based on feedback, so that will continue to evolve, as will our expansion of SPS Access Class. So due to COVID, we were not able to expand the partnership into the spring this year as we had planned to veteran teachers. So hopefully in collaboration with the foundation, we'll be able to offer that expansion in the spring of 2021. And then we continue to gather feedback on the supports needed for new classified staff that we onboard annually.
Okay, and our next strategy is 2.1.2, and it really focuses on our recruitment efforts and particularly our relationships with our local higher education partners. Just a couple of the highlights from this area this evening. We continue to identify ways that we can better advertise and get the word out about our district and about opportunities that we have for individuals to join our team. Two specific additions this year that we are particularly excited about were our partnership with Education Weekly, participation in their Top Jobs advertising forum. We had an opportunity to reach 168 individuals who navigated to our site, 48 of whom applied for positions with our district and 2 were hired. And those were individuals who we had not previously been able to reach through our advertising modalities, as well as one of the fairs identified in the materials, a virtual diversity fair for educators. We participated in that online job fair with 100 other schools. Over 800 individuals participated. 30 of those came and spoke with our representatives specifically, and 4 indicated that they were applying for positions in our district. And so we're excited to continue to look for opportunities to further enhance those recruitment opportunities and advertising modalities moving forward. This year, we have hosted 10 operational and support fairs with 36 recommendations for hire coming from those support events. We hosted 10 fairs last year as well with 41 recommendations, so consistent with where we were this time last year. In addition, we participated in 9 certified recruitment events. Several of those we hosted in-house as compared to 6 during this time frame last year. We've also continued with our fall student teacher celebration and our spring Teach SPS event, where we invite those future teachers in to learn more about our district. And we had increased attendance at both of those events. And I've neglected this evening to bring to you the total number of hires from those events, but we continue to use those 2 events as recruitment opportunities for our district as well. We've also, just recently, thanks to your support, entered an MOU for a year-long internship academy program with Missouri State University. And that is at Wanda Gray Elementary and allows those future teachers to be in our classrooms from teacher induction days, where they will be paid to participate in those days, a minimal amount, through the end of the school year. So it's a year-long experience for those future teachers, and it's a great recruitment opportunity for us. Once we have them in our system working with our students, we're confident that they will want to continue in that work. Our next steps, we will continue to find ways as the market becomes more and more competitive and as technology changes, our recruitment needs to shift. And so we will continue identifying ways to continue to recruit and enhance our opportunities in that area. And we are also working with Missouri State University on a collaborative effort to transition or support paraprofessionals moving into teaching positions. Just before we closed due to COVID-19, we were in discussions with MSU about a grant program that they are pursuing to support scholarships to fund paraprofessionals returning to complete their teaching credentials. And so we will continue to work with Missouri State on that program. Oh. There we go. Oh, wrong way, I apologize. 2.1.3. As we look at 2.1.3, we're looking again at recruitment and then also at that support and retention of that qualified and diverse workforce. We know that some of the strategies that we utilize include early notification of decisions to retire or to resign from positions, which allows us then to get to the marketplace a bit earlier and engage in early hiring efforts. And this evening, we're pleased to report that our early notice program remains quite strong. We had 102 teachers and 7 administrators provide notice during that January, February, and March timeframe as compared to 93 teachers and 6 leaders this time last year. That allowed us to then begin that hiring in a much earlier time frame. And this spring, we conducted our internal interview process and interviewed 67 teaching candidates, of whom 7 were issued early teaching contracts and 50 were recommended for additional building interviews, and those placements are ongoing presently. As you know, our goal is to complete that hiring of 60% by May 1. We moved that up, made that a little more of a challenge for us this year since we met that 85% goal last year. And as of May 1, we had hired 90 certified teaching positions for this upcoming school year as compared to 85 during the same time frame last year. We also processed 60 internal transfers. And so those were teachers moving from one building to another building without a change in their pay grade. That 90 as of May 1, as compared to the positions that were posted, was at about 77% of the posted positions. But that does change a bit because we do have teachers who may move into a director position or a coordinator position or a different position, and that will open up another position that will then need to be posted. But we are well on target to meet that objective of the 60%, and I believe we will exceed it by a substantial margin. An additional highlight, our applicant pool remains quite strong, and I apologize for the graphic in the presentation, but it is in your materials. I believe it's on pages 9 and 10. What you will see as we look at our applications and applicants, our applications remain strong, although fewer applications than previous year for certified staff. What is really exciting is when you look at the applicants, when you look at individuals who have submitted applications with our district, we have 2,190 unique individuals submitting applications in the current year. And during the like time period last year, we had 1,286 individuals. And so we had fewer applications submitted by significantly more people. And so they were more targeted in the positions for which they were applying. But we had almost 1,000-person increase in individuals applying for certified positions in our district. We had a similar result with our operations staff. When you look at the total applicants, you will see that we had 680, I believe, last year, and almost double that number for the current year. And with our operations staff, we did place a temporary hold in April, mid-April, on hiring for those positions for the upcoming school year as we await better information about where we stand with staffing needs related to the COVID situation. We didn't want to rush out of the gate and hire early. In some of those operations positions, we wanted to wait until we had better information, and we anticipate beginning that hiring process again in June. And then 2.1.4, it relates to the evaluation and feedback processes that we engage in with our employees. And as of the end of April, we had conducted 7,878 observations of our teachers as compared to about 8,100 observations during that time period last year. When we moved to remote learning, we did provide the opportunity for our leaders and our teachers to complete their evaluation processes as of the end of the third quarter. We didn't think it was fair to try and evaluate teachers in a remote environment when they had not been teaching in that environment. And so we wanted to relieve a bit of stress and provide that opportunity. So we expect to see a slight decrease in the numbers of observations, but those have continued. Our supervisor training continued this fall and spring as well. You will recall that last year we had mandatory training for all supervisors in the district, and we followed that up with some enhanced training this year, and we had about 60 supervisors who participated in that training process. And another highlight, thanks to your support, we are moving to a new evaluation platform that is currently being piloted with our teachers. That pilot will end at the close of this week, and we will be transitioning our teachers as part of those next steps to that online evaluation platform in the fall, to be followed by review and revision of our operations staff evaluation processes, which we anticipate having built into that system the following fall of 2021. And we will continue to assess our needs for additional supervisor training and support as we move forward.
Changing of the guard again. Strategy 2.1.5 is really related to the job embedded professional learning that we provide ongoing to our staff throughout the school year. So highlights really of this particular strategy just include the update to our annual needs assessment survey. So reminder, that's the survey that all certified staff completes typically in the month of March, related to professional learning that's provided at their sites. And that gives us a frame for understanding around building additional learnings related to that. So I think two highlights to pull out here. 97% of those that were surveyed believe professional learning is an essential component for achieving the site and district goals. And then 94% have evidence that student achievement has increased as a result of implementation of professional learning provided. So again, we serve in a system with teachers who value professional learning and can see the direct correlation between that learning and what's happening in their classrooms with kids. So that's powerful. Two highlights around additional learnings and opportunities that have been provided to teachers, one specific to leaders, and then others across the system related to our equity initiatives. So we have brought on a layer of training called Adaptive Schools, which I talked to you about in the fall, but we were able to conduct that training for 30 leaders and specialists. And that training really is about the development of groups and facilitation of training to increase educators' ability to take that back to their classroom. And so we are starting that process with our leaders, and that will continue into next year. Ivania's work was highlighted in a previous report, but we felt like it should live within the body of this focus area as well. So just reminding you that we had equity champions and district leaders that were provided the 7 hours of facing racism training, as well as the 2 hours provided to all staff. That was a part of the learning platform for this year. While this goal and strategy are specific, this strategy specific to teacher learning, I wanted you to see a little bit behind the scenes about the collaboration we're doing between departments that provides us better layers of support for our teachers. So monthly collaborations were happening between the learning support or curriculum department, the learning development department, as well as learning coaches and Title I, just with the goal of enhancing our communication structures so that we can better support the messaging and the resources that are being provided to teachers. So I think that's about just building efficiency and craftsmanship across the system for those providing the professional learning to teachers. Also, we had a little bit of a rebranding related to some of our learning. So partnership between Dr. Pilley and myself and our teams to provide Aspire, Champion, Empower, which replaced what we previously did in Master Learner Institute and Blended Learning Mentor Training. Just again, about better aligning the services we provide and building that capacity for our master teachers. And then the last bullet there is about Equity Champions and the training they received to take directly back to their sites to facilitate that work. I think next steps here really are about a continued refining of support. So a survey went out this month to certified staff, really speaking to the learning specialist that's been providing on-site support and coaching to leaders and teachers. So just getting a gauge of how teachers are feeling about that so we can continue to evolve. We will maintain the standards of professional learning as a focus, specifically learning communities this spring and summer at our site professional learning days that all sites will come to. Again, expanding opportunities for adaptive schools and equity, and then just continuing to revisit the learning opportunities we're providing to our classified staff. Oh. No, there we go. Strategy 2.1.6 is about aspiring leaders and building leadership capacity from within. So highlights to share here is that we have started the second cohort of SPS Leader Track. We have 14 aspiring leaders participating in that. It began in August and it will run through December of 2020. So they are meeting monthly with program outcomes of increasing exposure to departments within SPS, building their leadership skills and capacities, and connecting them both internally and externally to those resources they will need to be a better leader. Jill, are we doing questions now or are we holding them? I'm sorry, I don't know.
I'm asking you, may I ask a question now so I don't forget it?
Alina?
Can you write it down?
Never mind, okay.
We'll just wait to keep the speakers on track, sorry.
Sorry, Jill, I promise I'll come back to you, write it down. So one of the highlights of this is that we continued a partnership with Leadership Springfield, and these leaders were allowed to attend one of the quarterly community access class opportunities, which again gets them out into the larger leadership network to expand their not only resources but supports as they bring that back, learning back to SPS. Another important piece to highlight is our partnership and consultation with the Wallace Foundation out of New York. Dr. Jungmann and I had the privilege of attending an opportunity to build our networking capacity with over 90 other districts related to principal pipeline development. So how can we strategically develop a pipeline that gathers our incoming leaders through aspiring leaders, current leaders, into veteran leaders? And so what does that development look like? We had an initial assessment and are currently working on building a plan using those consultation services. So next steps related to that will just be putting that plan into motion. We have one more layer of consultation in the month of June that Dr. Jungmann and I will attend again to get feedback on and begin development. And we will continue that second cohort that will end for evolving leaders in December of, or I'm sorry, for SPS Leader Track that will end in December of 2020.
And 2.1.7, this is perhaps one of my favorite areas where we get to highlight once again the competitive nature of our salary and benefits packages, thanks to you and your support of our staff. This information is information that you've seen before. We saw it in our fall report. 95% of our employees compensated on the teacher salary schedule are compensated at a rate that's higher than our regional peers. That's 1,800 of our 1,903 individuals who are paid on that scale, and our beginning bachelor's pay as well as our beginning pay for them on the master's scale is higher than our regional peers. Here's another look at the lifetime earnings comparison that we saw in our fall report, indicating that our employees who spend their career with us, lifetime earnings do exceed those of our regional peers. And next steps in that area, it is our responsibility to continue to evaluate salary and benefits to ensure that we continue to remain competitive. As you know, We completed that compensation study last fall, and that resulted in a new salary schedule, which helped to shore up on the operations side those salaries provided for that segment of our employee base, and we will continue to monitor those as well to ensure that they continue to remain competitive. And presently, Ms. Embry is leading an evaluation of our extra duty stipends, and we will be continuing that effort and may be bringing recommendations depending upon the results of that work. And 2.1.8, this revolves around ensuring that we have an engaging and collaborative work environment and that we are recognizing our employees in a valuable way. Here, we want to highlight for you our continued work in the area of recognition with the Power of One hero recognition. You have experienced that personally through numerous recognitions at the monthly board meetings. Just before we moved to remote learning, we completed a thought exchange with our employees and asked them, how would you like to be recognized? Stephen Hall is leading that effort for us, and we are working through the results of that survey to really try and identify what means the most to our staff and to see if we can redesign or enhance our recognition processes through that feedback. An exciting note, more than 2,700 employees participated in that annual climate and culture survey. That's an increase of 143 employees over the 4 years that survey's been in place. We've actually seen about a 700 employee increase in participation. And on the next page, we'll see what I find to be the most remarkable is that even with that almost 700 employee increase in participation, we are consistently seeing strong results. So we have great consistency across the board. I'm inspired to meet my work goals was 89% in 2016 and in 2019 at 88%. And so very strong engagement, collaboration, and support from our staff. The one area that I would note where we've seen a slight decline, and it of course is the area that concerns me a bit. It says I'm happy to encourage my friends and colleagues to work for SPS, and so we're going to explore that area a bit because we have seen a slight decline, but the other areas remain consistent even with that 700 employee increase in participation over the 4 years. And next steps. We will continue to focus on collaborative efforts with all of our employees. We'll be assessing that feedback that we mentioned through the thought exchange, and we will continue to work with our sites and our team-based our teams throughout the district to identify ways that we can support the onboarding and introduction of new team members to the district, to build those relationships early. And of course, we'll always continue to try and improve in the area of communication. That's always a challenge in any organization, and certainly in an organization of our size. And we will continue to work with Mr. Hall and his team to improve those efforts. And that brings to conclusion our presentation this evening.
Great, thank you, Penny and Nicole. At this time, board members who have questions or comments, if you would direct those to Penny and Nicole, and we know Jill has one, so we can start with Jill.
Hi, Nicole. When you were talking about the aspiring leaders, I was just curious whether they self-identify as having that goal or you are hand selecting them.
So both is the answer, right? So the application goes out and then we bring them in and talk with them about both the program goals and then their leadership goals, and then they're selected for that program. So both.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good question. Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any hands at this time. I do just have a question of inquiry to Penny about, and I don't even know exactly how to ask this question per se, but what are you seeing or what are you projecting around virtual recruiting? I mean, given the season that we've just lived in the last couple months and knowing that this is a high recruiting time and that type of thing. And I'm just curious what best practices you're seeing across the nation that maybe we're living in the age of adaptation. So I'm just curious.
So we are seeing an increase in these virtual job fairs, and it's really intriguing how you can participate in a very large event and then have essentially your own little room, much like we can through Zoom, to go in and meet with candidates specifically. I think that will continue, and I think it will grow, and I think it provides us tremendous access to candidates not only from around our nation but from around the world. And so I see it as an opportunity for us to grow, and I see it not only for us in Springfield, but as a profession, I see education needing to move into that much larger market than we have traditionally. And so I think it's a real bonus for us to have had this opportunity this spring to test it with the virtual job fair that we participated in. We're not fearful now moving forward, but I do see it becoming more and more commonplace for us.
Thank you. Because in some ways, it can potentially remove barriers to get access to additional applicants. So I find that fascinating, and I look forward to hearing more about that. Any other questions or comments? Of course, my fellow board members know that I always take a time and say there was a lot to celebrate in the mid-year report. I just would want to point out just the strong hiring percentage. You set a lofty goal, and even given how we've been operating the last couple of months, I'm just proud of the effort that you all have put in towards that. We know that there's great reward for those type of percentages. So lots to celebrate, Penny and Nicole.
Well, thank you, and we want to celebrate our leaders for putting in the time and the effort to complete those interviews, evaluate those applicants, and pushing that process forward. And so we want to thank them tonight as well.
Thank you, Penny and Nicole.
Thank you all. I wanted to comment just to Lena. I would say another thing to definitely celebrate is the depth of the applicant pool, as we saw that really expand this year. So I think our word about getting out to a larger audience is helping. We also know that the workforce situation is probably changing also. So while in the first 3 months of the hiring season, we were on a regular turnover rate, that's kind of slowed down significantly. And I would say that the pool will deepen significantly as for all positions, because we're just in a different workforce situation significantly than we were 60 days ago.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. And I don't know if it's in the larger report or not, because it wasn't in this PowerPoint, but I would be curious to see where those applicants are coming from, like what pools are causing, or triggering that. So if you tell me it's in the longer white paper, I'm sure I can find it. I'm just thinking.
Yeah, we'll have them follow up.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna move.
But quick question, just a thought.
Jerry.
John or Penny, one, how would you define our success rate of getting the teachers we want? I mean, when you've selected your teachers, you've interviewed, you've gone through, and you've picked who you want to get, how would you rate our success rate of getting those teachers that we want? Alina, what's our success rate of that's who we want to get? Would you define it?
Landing the ones that we've identified is I think the question. And I'll turn that back to Penny. Once we identify a candidate, what's our closing rate? And I don't know that we have an official number, but she could probably speak to that better than I could. So.
And I don't have an official number, but I will tell you of the 90 that we've hired this year, it's fewer than 10 told us no in that process. Say likely fewer than 5.
Yeah, that's I didn't need a percentage. I just thumbs up, thumbs down. I mean, if we want them, we usually get them. That's what I was.
Yes, we do.
Want to hear. Perfect.
Thanks. Great question.
Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, we will move on in our agenda to administrative reports. John.
So I'm going to apologize ahead of time because this one's kind of long. So just kind of hang with me, but there's a lot of stuff that I want to make sure that I know you get a lot of communications and probably are aware of a lot, but there's a lot of moving pieces going on right now. So I want to take the chance to make sure you're aware, as well as the community is aware of some of the moving parts and I also asked, obviously, the team members to provide those to me so we can just do it in a one-stop shop. We don't have to rotate mics, basically. So hang with me. A few things I want to make sure that everybody's aware of, and take notes, any questions, and love to answer at the end. So number one, obviously, school officially wraps up this week. So I want to start by celebrating our students, our parents, and our teachers, and our leaders who've all stayed thoroughly engaged in the work to the end. So I know that it could have been easy to quit on the year and quit on the work, but I've seen very little of that. And I can say from a parent, seeing my kids work, as well as seeing our leaders continue to show up and our teachers to continue to show up online to support our kids, it's been inspiring to watch. And we're closing strong in a situation where it would have been easy to tap out early, is what I would say. So thanks to all those who are closing strong. Food service will wrap up Thursday in its current structure. So as we wrap up the school year, our current structure will wrap up, and we've communicated that to our families, and they'll get extensive meals for this weekend if they show up Thursday. So I would encourage them to come and get a large basket of goodies, basically, because we'll be giving meals for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and so forth, to make sure that they're taken care of over the weekend. We will be transitioning to our summer program. So we will kick that off next Wednesday on the 27th. Our distribution structure will shift from every school site to more of a traditional Explore program where we have 15 sites. Meals will still be made available to the same students that are currently available, but we'll do it on 15 sites, and we'll do it on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they'll have access to 7 days of meals. And that's actually a change we're making moving forward. Currently, we're providing 5 days of meals, but for the summer, if you show up on Monday, you get a Monday, Tuesday meal. Wednesday, you get a Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, you get a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, both breakfast and lunch. So our food service team has put together a great plan, and we expect our community to continue to participate, and they'll still be very accessible in their neighborhoods. They just have to go just a hair further than every school site. They'll be available at 15 sites throughout our community, and communication will start on that as soon as we wrap up this food service program. Actually, flyers will go home on Thursday with everybody that picks up a meal, telling them about the program change for summer. And we'll be offering that through both June and July. We did get information just this week that they are extending the food service exemptions that we can do grab and go programs up through into July. So we'll definitely make sure that we're making that available for our families. So proud of our team for rallying around that work. Another important to note as we wrap up the year and as the city begins to open and we start to gradually move off some of the restriction environments, we are moving forward with a return to work plan that is being communicated to our 12-month employees. So we know a big segment of 12-month employees are already on site, continuing to do work on a regular basis, but we've moved a significant number to remote work also. They will be coming back beginning May 26th, staggering up through June 15th, based on the ability to get them technology set back up and their workstations located. We are spreading them out in our sites just to make sure that we're giving plenty of social distancing and putting all the necessary precautions in place that follow the community orders. But we will be returning our 12-month employees, and those are primarily to our administrative work sites. Those are a lot of the locations where we have work that's consistent over the summer. So that process kicks off May 26th. Communication is starting to go out this week regarding the return to work plan for those 12-month employees. Student contact will begin for student athletes and other activities beginning after Memorial Day also. Josh Scott, who we talked about earlier, our district athletic director, has done a nice job of working with our local health department and Gene Grable to design a plan that is staggered, that allows for some return to exercise and connection with athletes. It'll be small group, it'll be social distancing in the first phase, and then as the months go on, we will change those restrictions and try to make them less restrictive as long as an outbreak doesn't occur. So that process will be communicated this week also. So we look forward to some of our teachers and coaches regaining some contact with our kids in small groups after the Memorial Day break. In addition, we are, speaking of what's coming up, Explore to Go for grades 1 through 12 will begin June 3rd. And as we talked about before, our June session is a full virtual session. Grades 1 through 12, we're not offering a kindergarten program that month, but we will plan to do that in July. Currently, we have about 7,000 students of SPS students that have enrolled in June Explore to Go. So while it's not quite as high as what we would typically run on a June session, still pretty darn good participation. So of those 7,000, 3,500 are elementary, and the rest are kind of split out between middle and high school students that will continue to learn with us in June. And the curriculum team, as well as teacher team that's helping build up the online learning opportunities, are just working around the clock to make sure that this summer learning experience is incredibly engaging for our kids. So I really appreciate all the efforts going on to make sure that learning continues in the summer and we can fight the summer slide. That being said, July, our plan is to move forward with a seated option so that parents will have the choice to do a full virtual. So the same model that we're offering in June, we will offer in July, but we will also couple it with a seated option. So we are looking at reduced class size numbers, meeting with the health department to make sure we meet all of their expectations. We know that's still 5-6 weeks out, so we have to speculate a bit, but they are planning with us because that July session doesn't start till after July 4th. But that is something we want to do, is if at all possible, we want the opportunity for some of our kids to get back in our campuses and connect with our teachers, and our teachers want that more than anything also. So our hope is that we will open up enrollment soon for a July seated session. So stay tuned, but there will be virtual options in case people want to choose that too. Graduations remains planned for August 6th and 7th. No altering of that plan at this point. We know it's still a couple months out, and we'll start to work with specific details, but some of the encouraging things we're seeing is that occupancy, I think in future plans of the city's restrictions of large buildings, the percentages change. You know, we went from a 10% to a 25%. I think there's a future plan where that turns into a 50%. And then if you think of some of our venues and the things that we're going to try to do with large groups, hopefully that gives us the ability to execute those on behalf of our seniors, which I know everybody wants to do, and we're looking forward to handing them their official diploma covers hopefully soon in August. So stay tuned. That is all still a go at this point, and we'll let you know if anything changes. Moving beyond that, we are also recognizing our class of 2020 with some other things. We've tried to do that throughout what would have been their regular graduation time, but KY3 is putting together a special honoring the class of 2020 segment that will be viewable on Saturday, May 30th at 6:30 for a 30-minute display on some of the great accomplishments of this class. And if you're following the newsletter this week, you'll also know that Claudette Riley is doing features on several seniors. We're trying to tell the story of the class of 2020 in many different ways. A lot of videos were put out by our production team also to celebrate those classes over the last couple of weeks. So I tell my daughter, who's one of those members, that you're having the longest graduation in history. It's going to stretch for really 2 to 3 months. So soak it up. I know it's not what you planned on, but there are some benefits. So you're going to get celebrated a number of different times. So we look forward to that. Kindergarten and Wonder Years screening and enrollment are underway. So that we're doing a lot of virtual engagements, but we still are trying to make sure that we capture all the students that are ready to join us in August. So that process is still going on. Fall planning, I would just say in general, that we are working through the plan to remain starting on August 24th. You probably read things from the State Board of Education where they're going to allow districts to apply to the commissioner for a waiving of that start date, potentially start earlier, based on what we see at this point with our summer sessions and what we're trying to activate there. We don't anticipate needing to make that application. So we're going to try to engage all of our kids as much as possible through the summer learning. And to be honest, we need every day we can to make sure our facility, the facility plans are executed. So that later start date is actually a benefit as we try to get our facilities bond projects wrapped up for this fall. So August 24th remains the start date for the fall. Teams are, internal teams are reviewing a number of documents. As you know, guidance is abundance, but answers are hard to come by, right? So CDC guidance, MSBA published a good document with a lot of recommendations, a lot of questions to consider and things for districts to be thinking about. There's not a lot of firm answers out there in anything because we're kind of rebuilding, right? And we're building for a time where we don't even know what the restrictions will be. So I will tell you that our team is working to review the guidance that comes out and the number of documents, and we're collaborating both regionally and nationally with school districts to make sure that we're trying to identify all the things that we need to be thinking about and build up good recommendations for a reentry plan in August, as well as options, right? Because we know that likely we're going to need to be more adaptable and flexible and be prepared to know that the community and the environment could change on a moment's notice. So I would tell you that the team that is executing that includes teachers and administrators that are coming around the table to build out virtual learning plans, as well as hybrid learning plans, as well as modifications to our current seated plan, because even seated looks different than it did when we left in March, right? We can't just do it the way that we did it before without a lot of considerations to the environment. So it's incredibly complex work, but we've got teams working on it and trying to answer questions that are a little bit unknown at this point, but we will keep you updated as we progress. And we also think that summer is going to give us some opportunities to learn with our June virtual session, as well as our July seated session. Those will be opportunities for us to learn about the changes and how they work and how that affects August when we come back to start. That, I think, is most of those reports I'm going to hit. Jill did mention before we came online, Title IX guidance has been released by U.S. Department of Education that has impact on K-12 as well as higher ed, and our team is reviewing that to see the overall impacts. It's some significant changes, and we'll study that and determine if that results in policy or procedure changes that come before the board. MSBA will also be reviewing all of that guidance to bring a policy recommendation. So stay tuned. City Council, other things than COVID, they did approve a TIF project for Idea Commons. And for those unaware, that's the area down in the downtown area, partnership between Missouri State, a number of developers, and we sit on the TIF commission. Carol and Travis both sit on that commission. Both were supportive of that project. I think it's a good investment of some abatement opportunities to really invigorate maybe growth in that downtown area that has started, but will probably need some additional investments in order to continue. So very little impact to the district, but we did sit at the commission and support that project moving forward. Last thing on non-legislative and budget, and then we'll get to the legislative and budget here in a moment. Info to parents of Williams Elementary. You saw the Williams Elementary project on the bond issue earlier report. We start communicating with them during the last couple of weeks of school, making sure they're aware. Old Sherwood is your location next year, and we will bus all of you over to that location. So that communication has started. In case you hear any questions, you know, we've done this a couple times, right? We've done it with Delaware currently. We did it with Fremont previous. So we've got a pretty good process built. And this starts with communication to parents kind of during the last couple of weeks regarding what they can expect their school site to be and how transportation and those kind of things work for next year. So that communication has begun. That's the admin stuff, and I'm ready to move to legislative, but I'm going to take a breath and see what questions you have on the admin reports regarding into school, planning for summer, planning for fall, anything I can answer before we go to legislative.
Hi, John.
Denise.
I just wanted to make one comment. I appreciate you mentioning the recommendations, the MSBA recommendations. I have had several discussions, calls from community with concerns that is something that the Board of Education that we have approved, discussed, approved. And so I continue to remind people it is a set of recommendations, statewide recommendations, and Jerry may even want to speak to that, but I'm glad you mentioned it just so that folks listening or that might be tuning in understand it's recommendations, but not what has to happen, because it, sometimes folks read part of it or they pass on part of it to someone else, and then there's all of a sudden concerns about some kids going to school in the mornings and some in the afternoons. And so I appreciate you mentioning that as it is a set of recommendations. So thank you.
And I would add to that, I would prefer that recommendations isn't even the term used, that these are considerations, not recommendations, because we're not recommending they do these. These are things that districts need to be thinking about. And as John said, each one of these reentry plans are going to be unique to the district. Our reentry plan is going to be totally different than theirs. And so these are just things to think about. That's why we got a lot of heat from it, nationwide even, for that, because, this is an edict from the State Board of Education.
Yeah.
These are considerations. And so people freaked out that these were even put out. And so they're considerations, and that's things that a lot of times the districts don't even know what they don't know. And that's why we tried to gather all that information so that, think about it, but that it means working with your health department, working with your city, working with your county, to do a reentry plan that's right for Springfield, right for Nixa, right for Ozark, not everybody. As you've seen, it's not a one size fits all. This is not what that was intended to do. So, but I think it's cleared up now, and so we kind of got that corralled back in, that these are considerations that districts ought to be thinking about. So it was kind of a rough patch for a week or so.
I can imagine the calls you received, because I know what we received and what I received from the legislature and other places. So it's really
20,000 hits in one day for social media.
It's about options and considerations, and it's just a conversation starter, I think, for districts. And
absolutely,
so it's good.
I love the word considerations. That's great. So I'll pass that on too.
Anything before we move to the legislative? All right. Are you good with me proceeding?
Yes, please.
All right. So a few more things. This page isn't quite as long as the last one, I'll just tell you, but legislative session has ended, and that's always a good opportunity for us to reflect back on what passed and what didn't pass. And we all know that this session was different, just like our spring was different than any session we've ever seen before, with a major interruption in the process. Just in general, I would say what did pass, there were a few things, not as much as we would see in a typical year, because the timeline was constrained and focus got shifted, I think. So some of the things that did pass, vaping ban in schools, teaching certification for military spouses, drinking water safety, property reassessment controls, that was a big thing early on. But the bill that passed is pretty limited in its impact, so I think it doesn't hurt us in any significant way like some of the bills that we were monitoring early. PSRS reporting, boycott Israel contract language issue that came up in the last few days, and public funds on ballot issues. And it was really a clarifying language with a little bit of an additional penalty. So nothing that we saw that was highly impactful to the way we do business on a regular basis. One thing that did pass that's been on the radar for this community for quite some time is the enabling legislation for an early childhood sales tax. If you remember, that really started with the Every Child Promise conversation about how do we fund early childhood. It's been at the legislature for years, and it's always stalled out a bit, but it did pass with a package of enabling legislation. The good news is we know we've been able to expand early childhood through the formula since then. That's allowed us to proceed, but this does provide another funding stream if the community ever decides that they want to proceed with that. So it would allow all cities, or any city within Greene County, to proceed with a sales tax focused on early childhood education. So it's a nice tool to have in the tool belt in the future in case we need it, or if we want to see further expansion. What didn't pass, that's sometimes as important as what did pass. And we know some of the things that are labeled as educational reform. We would disagree whether or not they're positive reform, but they get classified into kind of this big group sometimes of charter expansion, charter funding, voucher expansions. Those things did not move through the legislature this year successfully. Some other bills that didn't, that we were watching closely were virtual funding modifications, reading directive, transportation overflow, which was a positive thing. So some of these were good, some of them we would have seen as bad, but those things did not play out. Also, the board election changes that were being discussed at one point, that did not play out. There was some seclusion and restraint changes and a host of other provisions, to be honest. There's some really large, as you know, and received info from MSBA, big omnibus bills with 30 to 40 provisions that were piled up in the last week. Both of those stalled out and never came to a vote on the floor to really proceed with all of that stuff packaged on them. So they sometimes get too heavy at the end of the session for them to really move. So I think that's what happened to those two bills. So other things that happened in the legislature, the budget, the House and Senate approved the FY21 budget on May 8th. That goes to the governor's desk for signing. That did include full funding of the formula at 6375 SAT. Now the question of whether or not they will be able to reach that is in doubt. We'll talk about that a little bit with what we've learned about the current year budget. So 6375 was adopted. Transportation did receive an additional cut from what we had thought it would end up at. It started the year at 107 million total. It ended in the appropriation at 93 million total. So that's about a 13% reduction off of current year allocation that we'll have to deal with moving forward. Other things, Proposition C, the projection on that came down just a little bit because that's a statewide sales tax and it's a direct flow through. So all that they authorize is whatever comes in goes out, but I think knowing what the economy is looking like, they pulled that projection down just a little bit. One of the other things that was on our list that we were teed up to get actually was a $500,000 for a statewide virtual design of career access programming that the governor had put into his original program budget that was really targeted directly to the launch budget in order to help do workforce development courses. That passed, but they changed the provision. It says it will be done through an RFP process. So you have to apply for that. It does have to be awarded to a K-12 district in the state of Missouri. So, as that comes out in the fall, that might be an opportunity for us to continue to expand opportunities for both our kids as well as kids statewide that we serve through the launch program. Current FY20 restrictions not passed as part of the legislature are a part of our reality also. We already know that the supplemental appropriation that the legislature passed got restricted. That was the $16 million restriction that happened. The transportation funding got restricted by $7.1 million already this year. That took that 107 that was originally appropriated down to 100 million. And then we received the word Friday that the Classroom Trust Fund, and the Classroom Trust Fund is a specific line item that helps make up the formula. So if you go back to that SAT I talked about, state adequacy target of 6375, a component of that is built by the Classroom Trust Fund, and that is gaming funds. Bottom line, that's what goes into that bucket to help fill. We obviously know that gaming has changed significantly in the state of Missouri as casinos have been shut down, and thus we will not receive a Classroom Trust Fund payment in the month of May. And the impact for us is that SAT is going to drop from 6375 to 6310 in the current year, and that's a $1.7 million withhold from the current year budget. Don't know if that's all or not, or what plays out in June payment. Could we see the exact same thing over again, or did they cut enough to make up for what they don't see coming in June? To be honest, we're going to learn more about that tomorrow. There is a call with the department and the governor's office on education funding that happens at 9:30 in the morning with superintendents, and we'll be gaining some more information regarding that cut and if we can anticipate any additional at the end of this year. As most of you know, Missouri is pretty unique as compared to a lot of other states. It requires the governor to balance the budget by the time we close the books on June 30th. So there is no, hey, we'll make up for this next year, or there is no carrying over debt to next year. So whatever comes in, he's got to cut the expenditures to make sure that he doesn't go beyond that by June 30th. So that puts us in a pretty precarious situation at the end of the budget year, knowing that revenues have slid and slid hard, and that tax filing that was on April 15th is now on July 15th, and tax filing is a component of revenue creation, right? I mean, we know that people that owe taxes typically pay them the last day, right, or very late in the process. So if they're able to delay that till July 15th, that's going to take us into a new budget year, which means the end of this budget year is a little unpredictable right now. Hopefully we learn a little bit more about it tomorrow, as well as are there any implications that they foresee regarding what was actually passed by the legislature for next year. So again, I've got more answers than I did the last meeting, but I don't have all of them yet, and we probably will just get a little bit more every meeting that we go to. So we'll bring you more information on June study session, but here's what we know today. Last thing on budget, we do know that we will get some CARES funds, right? So that was in part, that was in the first stimulus. So that gets allocated through the Title I formula. It gives us some flexibility in the use of that. And it gives us a pretty good timeline flexibility that, unlike some CARES funds that are coming to communities that have to be spent immediately, this gives us some time to be more thoughtful with this. We do not have to expend all of that until September of 2022. So it does give us a little bit of time to think about, do we need to use some of it to fill gaps for this year, fill gaps for next year that we can't predict right now. So as we go through the budget process, we'll talk about the CARES funds and their implications for our future budget also. We know that they're one-time funds, so we have to be really thoughtful about those gap-filling funds, about obligating them to long-term expenditures. So that is legislative and budget update. What do you have for me?
I think those are some of the record. That was a record admin report and a record legislative report in the last 4 years. So thank you. I was jotting down, taking notes. My hand is actually just a little bit sore. So thank you for all of that. Any questions or comments for John?
We'll keep you updated as we learn more.
I would just say thank you, John and Carol and team, for staying up to date with all that's going on, and John, for all the advocacy work that you did in Jeff City, for all the traveling, for all the conversations that you were helping lead. I just really appreciate, we really appreciate all your efforts. So thank you. Not hearing no other comments at this time, we can move into our next agenda item, which is board comments. Any particular board comments that you and my fellow board members would like to share at this time? I see faces and no hands right now, so I believe the information that Kathy sent me, John has already covered some of the calendar dates in his report. The next Board of Education study session is scheduled for June 9th. And as you all know, we will be returning back to craft for that session. And I would imagine that the district will release information regarding the details and next steps for the public moving forward. Any other comments, or we will keep moving? Let's see, agenda item number 14 is our plus delta. If you have any plus deltas for tonight's meeting, please email that to Kathy, and we are happy to review that during our next board officer meeting to continue to improve this process. Our next agenda item is to vote to go into executive session, which we need to do tonight. The recommended action is that the board meets in executive session to discuss collective bargaining matters as provided in section 610.021, section 9, RSMO. Is anybody willing to affirm that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Denise, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Charles, second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Denise.
Aye.
Jerry.
Aye.
Jill.
Aye.
Bruce.
Aye.
Charles.
Aye.
Sharita.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Just a notation to the board members, we will leave this Zoom call, take a 5-minute break so that our administrators can gather together. And then Kathy sent us a separate email with the new Zoom link for the executive session. Any questions about that before we log off? Okay, it's 8:15. We'll take a 5-minute break and I'll see you in exec session. Thank you for those joining us. Good night.